So we thought, when we were preparing earlier today, Andrea and I, we very quickly realized we should stop doing this because a lot of the conversations we should be having now instead of earlier, like 2 hours ago, and then sitting as like, we already talked about that, we already talked about that too. Anyway, before we dive into some of Andrea's passions that go way beyond my thinking, so I'm hoping for lots of interesting insights here, we thought we'll use this opportunity for a little bit of a recap of what we have seen these last 2 days. This does a bit of, I should not do this. Okay, we'll try to do a little bit of a recap. We started off seeing quite a bit of AI. It was also nice to see many of the talks, some of them using a little bit of AI, but a lot of them still doing what I like to call data stuff. It was really nice for me personally to see that we had a nice cheminformatics, QSAR, ADME, TOX kind of presentation on stage as well. That kind of goes back to the things I've been doing 10 years ago or so. Very badly, but I've done that 10 years ago. And then, yeah, so it was a nice breadth of kind of deep down technical stuff and other talks. What was your highlight, Andrea? Yeah, outside of the Knime talks?
What a journey. First of all, what an event. Right? So as a participant, I enjoyed it, and I think you guys did an amazing job. Now, I'm biased because I'm talking with you, but what an event. We started from agents. You kicked it off with agents, simple agents, which use simple tools, and then they become intelligent tools. But then you need to put them together in a more complicated, agentic structure, and you can create through workflows an intelligent interface between humans and AI. And I think that's this progression of complexity reminds us how, as humans, we need to be even ready to manage complexity, to manage uncertainty, to manage the non-deterministic space. And indeed, that could be one of the challenges as technologists that we need to manage.
So this concept of having very simple building blocks, and then at some point in time you see some emergence of something where you say, this is wild, I had no expectations to be able to do that. Is that something you agree with?
Yeah. It's when things get complicated, you need to use skills that go beyond what naturally we would use when programming, let's say, managing technology. For instance, yesterday you were mentioning the emergent skills that data and AI people need to have, and some of them were retrospective. I was thinking about them. They were very human, right? They were less technical and very much more human. Now, on the point you are highlighting the fact that these systems become complex, that we will need to be good at creating organizations of agents, like an HR manager would do together with managers, with an organization of human beings. Roles and responsibilities of these agents, how they will interact with each other, what guidelines they will need to follow. So the type of skills we need to manage this complexity of simple agents becoming complex is different, and we need to get ready to it.
True. You're racing ahead here a little bit to other topics of the conversation. Okay, so that part of kind of emergence of more complex behavior, there's lots of analogies there, right? The ensemble systems also being better than each individual and so on. The wisdom of the crowds, one of those topics from the early days when those ensembles popped up. And then this concept you also briefly touched upon, that this idea of having a common language that allows you to have humans and AI collaborate when it has to do with working with data.
Yes. So I think Sasha, they mentioned that in the morning very brilliantly with the example of Kai. But I think we need to be aware that there is a very long-term transformation, which is like this abstraction level, a growing abstraction of the interface between humans and computers. And I normally use this slide that we should probably see on the screen to just get us a feel of what this growing abstraction looks like. and it looks like a continuum. I don't know if we can pop it up.
The slides?
Yeah, it looks like a continuum, right? So if we, over time, the level of abstraction has increased. And in the 80s, the way we were interacting with computers were very different, right? So now let's see how old as an audience we are collectively. Okay, yes, that's the thing. So in the 80s, some of you actually raise your hand if you ever coded in assembly language. Yes. Ah, wow. Okay, me too. Okay, right. So, and if you go to the next iteration of this chart, no? So the code that you will see on the screen in a second was like maybe 20 lines of codes to do a multiplication, 8 times b. You remember that, right? Because you had to, right?
Yeah,
thank you. That was fun, right? Well, it depends on the point of view. But that's the level of abstraction we had in the 80s. And then that's assembly. That's the 20 lines of code-ish, to do a multiplication. Then, of course, the programming languages became more abstract. We got to, okay, today is to Python. Okay, that's a multiplication, even much more than just a multiplication, because it prints it out as well. But then, this thing kept evolving. And Knime had a great role, and is having a great role in this, right? So workflows as abstraction layer for collaborating with data, with algorithms in a way that is leaning towards the human way of communicating. In this case, the visual communication, making it like putting as a diagram. Of course, I don't need to explain what a visual workflow is. And you know what the next level of this is, of course. Next level of abstraction, natural language. Natural language, right? So you ask Kai to do something for you, as we saw in the morning with Sasha, and we get it done. So the level of abstraction is increasing. I think we as, let's say, first technologists in our company, in our organizations, we need also to deal with this increasing level of abstraction, because we might need something different than what we used to do at the times of assembly, and also more recently with the visual workflows. So we need to keep evolving the way we communicate with computers. What do you think?
No, this is a nice way of looking at it, and I was trying to hint at that yesterday as well, that a part of this visual program that you're building now, the moment you add AI to that, a part of that logic, that program, that definition of what it's supposed to do is actually in the prompt.
It is, and the prompt, so this is a good news for us, because it means that computers are sort of like leaning towards our way of communicating. Prompts is natural language, it's our way of communicating. Now, this means that we need to reflect on the type of skills we need to write the prompt, and so to program to prompting, as you were saying. Because I think I can see a lot of humanistic skills that are coming back to us. They're going to be more and more important over the next months and years. For instance, rhetorics, right? So Aristotle, rhetorics, the art of convincing, persuading. Now, it looks like sometimes when you write the prompt, which is very complex, right? It's kind of like, it looks like you're convincing the LLM of doing something, isn't it? Yes, it is. And Aristotle was using these ethos, credibility, logos, the logic, of course, and pathos as modes, so emotions as modes to convince. And we are all going to use them. I'm sure of that. Also the emotional part. I was, well, you remember there was this like paper coming out some time ago from researchers from Beijing University and Microsoft about the impact of adding emotional stimulus, into a prompt. So things like, your answer is going to be very important for my career. When you add that sentence in a prompt, these researchers found that in average, you got like an uplift of 11% accuracy. Just by adding these words. And so this is my word, like, what's going on here? a machine that responds different when we put emotions in it, like Aristotle would tell us to do. And
But just to interrupt there, that also means that it's even more crucial that it's not just written prompts, but they not only have audio, but also visuals, so they can detect the Italian language as well.
Yes. If we had visual prompts with me doing this, how powerful,
That would be
we should
awesome.
add this to Kai.
Yeah.
Like with the webcam and...
It's like, come on, get it done.
Come on, let's help me. No, but I think this thing with the 11% is interesting, and it looks like magic, it looks like weird, really. Why emotion? But then if you think about that, LLMs learned from the pile of documents, terabytes of data. We don't even know how much data has been used. And in that data, in that text, we find conversations where probably humans were interacting, and as soon as the emotional input was arriving in a sentence or in the usage of words, and maybe hands moving, the conversations were going more towards maybe the direction that one person wanted. So, in other words, these machines are learning from us. There is nothing more human than what is artificial in the end. Because artificial is the only thing really we build through technology. And the French philosopher Simon Don used to say, technology, actually, the technical object is humanity crystallized. So it's the crystallization of human movements and human, let's say, aims that become a technical object doing something as a human would do. No? So at the end of the day, we are crystallizing our knowledge, and also we're crystallizing maybe even the emotions in there, in the LLMs.
It's interesting. So you could argue that we are now also, all of our data science teams, part of the skill set is being rhetorically super eloquent. But you could also argue that what the LLMs learned from the grand average of people, I'd argue that most people aren't that skilled. So you kind of almost need to make sure that you figure out, you need to learn what the average rhetorical skill is.
That's interesting. Indeed. The famous, stochastical parrots, right? Yeah. So that is like what we find in LLMs is a bit of an average of the average of the average, no? So it gets, but it's all in there. It's all in there. It is like deep network of ways. So with the right prompts, we can pull the right plugs.
It's interesting. So we are going to start teaching rhetorics for AI, how to talk to an AI that works. It's almost a little bit like in the old days when the first speech recognition, and this is a joke that I'm stealing, but anyway, when the first speech recognition systems came out, there was this training phase, right, where you had to make sure it starts recognizing your voice. And the question was always, are we training the system, or is the system training us to speak how it recognizes best? And then later we were trained how to Google, right? How do I Google so I actually get the responses? So maybe we'll do the same with the LLM prompting.
Yeah, it goes two ways. Yes, absolutely. Some of the prompting techniques are, weird, like double down, like repeating twice the same thing. Why? It's a very, human thing to become more convincing by just repeating, maybe in a bit of an aggressive way. So we are learning these things. Yes, we're learning.
How do they say you have to say it so often until somebody finally repeat it back to you? So that's what you have to do with the LLM as well.
Yeah. Yes.
Prompt until it returns it to you. That's very interesting, the rhetorical stuff. The other thing that you just very quickly touched upon was also kind of cute, this organizational role. It's almost like you have an HR department. I had that yesterday. I didn't really show this, how you need to define to the prompt, who are you, right? There's a description of you are a helpful assistant, You have that kind of a background. You're talking to this kind of an audience. It's almost like describing the role that you're playing inside this organization, right?
Indeed. It's like really building like an organizational chart and anticipating also the dynamics between agents. There were some early papers in 2023 talking about how independent agents would collaborate or maybe block each other. And the researchers were studying, for instance, the flow of news, like fake news among independent agents by simulating what was happening in a small town, right, where these agents were actually talking with each other, collaborating with each other. So we will have to learn, possibly also, what type of friction could happen between agents, and like an HR manager would do. That's fascinating, right? To become a bit HR all over.
And then having mediation sessions where you help them refine their role description better, so that going forward they have less of a friction. Could be interesting.
Why not? Why not? Yeah. There are some, let's say, unexpected human skills. And actually, yesterday, in your presentation, at some point you had this slide which made me reflect on the emerging skills. So you added at some point with the transition all the emerging skills that have to be added on top of the existing ones for data people, right? Data and AI people. And so you add prompt engineering, which is rhetorics, okay? Then you add context provisioning, so the ability to put the right context in there. And that's another field of semantics, pragmatics, how the context in a conversation is actually impacting the outcome of the conversation. So we found plenty of humanistic skills that are somehow unexpected, right? And they probably will be added in the curricula of people, managing agents. So it wouldn't hurt to go back also to this type of humanistic skills. And I'm the first one to say, as a trained, let's say, engineer, computer scientist, that is out of my comfort zone. I'm going to go out of my comfort zone, although I'm interested in these things. And we need to reflect, also on what we learn, what we train on.
Yeah, it's probably not something you directly copy over, but there's a lot of inspiration from that one, right? When you think about that, it's really trying to convince the LLM to do something. It's a very different way of, you're not just instructing it, right? You're convincing it to do what you ask it to do, and describing the role more specifically and how it fits into the next one. It's kind of interesting because some of the prompts that we were writing when we were writing this, putting together this Ask Knime anything agent, and when I say we, I mean everybody here, but me. Because I was just complaining. But some of the prompts are interesting because they have a very clear description of the interface, right? This is kind of what you need as a tool. And it's not just the prompt of the overarching agent, but it's the description of the tool itself. And the description of the tool, I mean, with my computer science glasses on, describes in human language, this is what you expect to come in, this is what you will produce as an output. That's an interface of a function, in a sense. But it also describes dependencies, right? So for instance, the customer info tool says you will be provided with a customer ID, which in our case is typically a domain. And by the way, if you need the domain, there's another tool that would help you create a domain, get the domain for a customer name, which is nothing else than a dependency declaration.
So dependencies, interfaces, they're all now going to be described in natural language. Of course, it doesn't mean that we need to stop studying, computer science or how the technology works. But there is a lot of humanistic skills that will, let's say,
so which way do you think this will go? That we will go more in a direction where we're going to have a more formal structure to define these interfaces and dependencies, and then we translate that automatically in something that gets injected to the LLM, or we train people on writing text that has the right information?
I think that we need to, we are not even sure as humans today exactly what human skills precisely we need to develop. Because the thing we were mentioning earlier, the example of rhetorics, convincing with empathy, These are all coming now as a new piece of knowledge, because we don't know the black box, what's how it really knows. So it's very difficult, just to your point, it's very difficult to predict how this will work. But for sure, this abstraction that we've seen earlier is going to stay there. And so, of course, the type of skills, like we changed our skills from programming in assembly to prompt engineering, this is going to change. It's going to affect all of us, not just the end user, but also the technology people that are behind building these tools and systems.
It's probably going to, my thinking is that it's not going to go into a totally formal direction, but it's more like, we already now have, even in between humans, different types of language, right? If you think about how a contract is written, it uses a very different way of it's human language, but it's a very different way of phrasing things, so it's very clear, very precise. It's kind of trying to be extremely objective about what it's trying to describe, what the duties are, what you get for it, that type of stuff. Lots of other things are much more emotional, right? You're trying to convince it. So it's almost like for LLMs, we're going to develop some sort of a language a way of talking to them is probably better than a language.
The way of talking, yes. And for sure, this is one of the reasons. So the fact that we need to learn this new way of talking is one of the reasons why I feel, I don't know about all of you, but I feel that, especially when it comes to generative AI skills, I'm always behind. I keep trying to stay up to speed, to stay updated, but I'm always behind. And on this one, actually, another thing I wanted to share is about this one, right? So the concept of knowledge relevance, the half-life of knowledge relevance. This is a model that was born a few years ago, actually. So the AI domain is a bit of a latest addition. What we study at school, after around over 20 years, loses 50% of its relevance. And then, as we progress, university, of course, expires a bit faster. Professional-wise, the half-life of what we learn at work is 10 years. And if you think about what you were doing 10 years ago, it was probably kind of very different, or at least this type of skills you needed, 50% of them were probably different. And of course, it depends on the domain, on your role, and your career. More recent studies confirmed that for the IT overall, let me put this like generic word, half-life was around 5 years. But hey, what about Gen AI? All the things you need to learn how to manage to tame the beast of large language models. That's my assumption. I'd like to hear your take, but the half-life is months, is not years. At least on the specific Gen AI way, because we're talking something that is a strange animal, Gen AI, isn't it?
That's definitely true. The problem with that graph, it seems to suggest that you can start at any point and very quickly catch up, and then you're as good as the others, that after a year, whatever they learned before is totally wasted. Not quite sure it's that true. I think there's something you kind of need to constantly build on top of that. And if you stop for half a year, then you're absolutely left behind on the AI side. Yeah, very true.
Yes. There's a bit of a build-up, let's say. But as also organizations will have today, there was a great presentation on AI literacy. So this is not just for us, not only, let's say, technical people or anyway, those who know how things work, they need to go towards learning about AI, because also from a cultural perspective, the emotions around AI are very mixed, are still very much mixed, right? Maybe it's not anymore the AI is, let's say, taking our jobs, but still there is a lot of resistance in organizations. And I think we need to, AI literacy, the speech of this morning, is a great weapon that we can use, a great tool that we can use to get AI accepted also from the broader organization. Yeah. So it's Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably argue there that there's the people that will, or not everybody here, will start using AI systems with various types of interfaces, but then designing the AI underneath the hood, designing really the prompts that deliver the responses. I think that will probably, it's a little bit like programming, right? Not everybody needs to be a programmer, but you need to kind of understand what it does. Or the famous, that's obvious, this car example, right? You don't need to be an engine mechanic to be able to operate a car. Not anymore, right? At the beginning, absolutely, but not anymore. I think that'll go a little bit in that direction as well.
Right.
And then, of course, you need to understand the trustworthiness of AI system. So that's maybe we can go a little bit in that direction. Will we ever really, truly trust AI? Be able to trust AI? We just say, do this, I completely trust you. Nothing can go wrong.
Well, I think, yes, I think it was Jamie mentioning this analogy of the AI agent as a junior employee. So you can trust, but it's there is always there is a path for the AI. At some point, we will trust more and more. But I think one of the things we are forced more to do as humans is to be more and more critical and to develop also our critical thinking. At the end of the day, probably our job as humans will include more and more this, being critics towards what the AI is telling us. It doesn't mean that we will never trust it fully. I think that it will become, as we give more and more autonomy to AI agents, also our critical thinking will have to develop. So we'll trust it, but there is always a layer of, let's say, critical thinking that we'll have to put it, and probably this layer is even going to become more important in the future.
It's a nice analogy to also where I always say data science is almost, it's a little bit like it's an education and an apprenticeship, right? You need to learn the techniques, you need to understand what the hell you're doing, but at the same time you need to develop this gut feeling to be able to say, it doesn't feel right, and then you dig a little bit deeper, and the same is probably true for AI, yes. I mean, I typically look at it more like there's certain things where you are going to trust AI to be good enough, because good enough is all you're looking for, right? Yes. And in other cases where you say AI should really be right, then you probably do want to have at least that gut feeling to be able to say, wait a second, and explain this to me, and that's the moment to go back to the beginning where you need a common language. So AI can actually explain to you what it was thinking when it came up to whatever result it presented to you.
Indeed. Anyway, I think we all, after all, also everything we found in this conference, I'm coming back home with even, with overall a positive feeling, that it's, we need to, embrace, study a lot. So I've seen a few things that I will definitely go back now and deep dive on. So we need to stay curious about how AI is evolving, keep studying. I try to always keep a part of my week, to block it to study, to practice new things. Maybe, I try to use this time also to study maybe some, classics or some more humanistic literature, because it's, I really believe is going to help. And well, the other thing is like we need to stay human, because at the end of the day, it's as we are seeing, and as we just anticipated, AI needs humans, so we'll become even more humans if you will like. So I'm not worried about humans, machines behaving like humans, more like humans forgetting about how to be humans, and of course we don't want to go that way.
That's a good point. And this graph is actually really reassuring for me, because I completely ignored humanistics and stuff in school because I was focused on math and physics and everything else was stupid. But I would have forgotten it anyway by now. So I'm still good to catch up. And I'm very much looking forward to continuing these types of conversations at some other time. Thank you very much.